Welcome to the Dickens Diaries. Welcome back. I hope this is like a really fun welcome back to you. This bird stealing my show. So this is going to be a new series that is of course complementary to the Tolstoy Diaries, which so far I've really only done for like childhood, boyhood, youth, and war and peace. But I've just been getting so into Charles Dickens lately. It's so interesting to see how the tables are turning, because when I started like doing vlogs for the Dickens versus Tolstoy book club, which is what this is also for, I'll leave all the information down below. Please feel free to join at any point. You're more than welcome. We just had a very fun live show, I think both of our favorites, last weekend, which was just so much fun, about Anna Karenina. But our pick for September and October is Nicholas Nickleby by Dickens, which is like his third novel. But I'm just absolutely loving this. I'm so motivated to talk about Dickens, and I think like I can see where I'm going in the future with like this debate and who I'm leaning towards and stuff. So this whole vlog is going to be about Nicholas Nickleby, which I am loving so much. Today is the 12th of September. And I just hit the 100-page mark last night, so I just wanted to like come on here, give you a little synopsis, give you my thoughts. As you can see, there's already just so many tabs, and I'm just feeling so inspired about Charles Dickens at the minute. So yeah, I think this is gonna be like a new favorite series of mine as well. And I just wanna like encourage more people to love Dickens, vote for Dickens in these debates because I think he's wonderful. So a brief synopsis: Nicholas Nickleby is about a man named Nicholas. He's a young, I think he's about 18 maybe, but his father dies and he essentially leaves his mother and his sister penniless. And so to support his mother and his sister, he goes to work at this school called Boys Hall in York. So I think it's in York. And we follow him like seeing the squalor, the misery, and the abuse that exists in these schools and in these places. And we already have quite a villainous figure in like the headmaster or owner of the school named Mr. Squeers. So yeah, just like sinking back into his world. It's a world that I really love. Like I love the atmosphere, I love the grime, I love the gloom, I love the fog. Like I just get the texture of everything in this world, and it feels like I can always come back to it and touch it, and everything is dirty. I just really like the exploration of Victorian England, and I guess pre-Victorian England. I just really love it, and like this book is already starting off so strong. I was not a big fan of the Pickwick Papers or Oliver Twist, the two books we read previously from Dickens, but I think this one is a very good contender so far, because even the first page, like I just turned to it and I literally just smiled and felt so warm and bubbly. It's so nice the way that this book starts off. Chapter 1 talking about Nicholas's, I believe, grandparents. A man who, taking it into his head rather late in life that he must get married, and not being young enough or rich enough to aspire to the hand of a lady of fortune, had wedded an old flame out of mere attachment, who in her turn had taken him for the same reason. Thus, two people who cannot afford to play cards for money sometimes sit down to a quiet game for love. Stop. So amazing. But so far the tabs that I'm keeping track of, the yellows are always like my favorite quotes and just stuff that I want to write down and be like, yes, that is beauty incarnate. But I think blue so far, there's a huge theme of money, capitalism, greed, income, poverty, just everything that Dickens likes to talk about. But I think particularly in Nicholas Nickleby, a lot of like money and currency and capitalism is going to be discussed. So that's kind of like what I'm keeping track of with the blue, and the effects that money and power have on people in the society at the time. And then pink is just like the stuff that I'm keeping track of for the debate, like points that I want to make about Dickens that I think are quite strong. Something so far that I found interesting, I feel like Nicholas Nickleby so far has been a mix between the Pickwick Papers and Oliver Twist, because not that Nicholas Nickleby is a series of sketches, but like in his preface, Dickens does say that he wants to produce a rapid succession of characters and incidents and describe them as cheerfully and pleasantly as in us lies. And so we've had like stories within stories, very much like in the Pickwick Papers where someone will give an account of a different story that they've heard. So we just had one about a bunch of sisters and their refusal to join a convent nuns, not witches, a convent, and there's just so many beautiful lines that came out of that. The monk who is like berating them that they need to join the convent, he's like, you will still be wasting the precious hours on this vain trifling, because they're like embroidering. And he says, alas, the few bubbles on the surface of eternity, all that heaven wills we should see of that dark deep stream should be so lightly scattered. I just love it. It's amazing. And like these are the descriptions that I live for and that I feel like Tolstoy sometimes gives us, but I just so much prefer, I think, Dickens' writing of them. There was a sullen darkness in the sky, and the sun had gone angrily down, tinting the dull clouds with the last traces of his wrath, when the same black monk walked slowly on, with folded arms, within a stone's throw of the abbey. A blight had fallen on the trees and shrubs, and the wind, at length beginning to break the unnatural stillness that had prevailed all day, sighed heavily from time to time, as though foretelling in grief the ravages of the coming storm. The bats skimmed in fantastic flights through the heavy air, and the ground was alive with crawling things, whose instinct brought them forth to swell and fatten in the rain. It's just delicious. Something else I'm keeping track of is like what I've come to like think of it as like coffin core. You know, there's like cottage core, there's like royalty core, there's dark academia. I just feel like Dickens, I would love to trace like his coupling of coffins and things associated with the dead and funeral processions and like clothing, decor, architecture, stuff like that, because in Oliver Twist we had a snuff box that was made out of a tiny coffin, like a tiny model coffin, and in this one already, in a different story within the story, we have this like specter or this apparition that represents like death and everything awful, who has a coat that's ornamented down the front with coffin handles. Where do I get one, Dickens? Please, that is just the coolest thing ever. His legs too were encased in coffin plates as though in armor, and over his left shoulder he wore a short, dusky cloak, which seemed made of a remnant of some pall. He's just so cool. But after that, I actually got quite emotional because we finally arrived at the school, and Nicholas sees like the state of the boys living there. And it's just like I actually almost teared up. I had a tear in my eye because it's so real, and that's what I also love about Dickens as well, is like he takes us to these places and he's like, okay, this is awful, you need to see this, because if you don't see this, you're not going to change. And it's just really hard to read about. This whole paragraph describing the children who are living in this school that their parents have sent them to, and that Squeers is essentially profiting off of the money that the parents are giving him. The children are described as pale and haggard faces, lank and bony figures, children with the countenances of old men, deformities with irons upon their limbs, boys of stunted growth, and others whose long meager legs would hardly bear their stooping bodies. There were the bleary-eyed, the hare-lip, the crooked foot, and every ugliness or distortion that told of unnatural aversion, or of young lives which from the earliest dawn of infancy had been one horrible endurance of cruelty and neglect. There was childhood, with the light of its eye quenched. What an incipient hell was breeding here. He just tells it so sympathetically, but so truthfully, and so it's just like real, it's blunt, it's there. And in this book, like I'm not sure how Nicholas reacts to it, but like that's something I wrote down, is that we have such a interesting perspective with Nicholas, because in Oliver Twist, like we very much follow the perspective kind of the 11-year-old boy who's working in a workhouse, and like he's the one suffering the neglect, right? And then we also follow kind of the flip side a little bit with the proprietors of the workhouse, but Nicholas in this case is like an innocent bystander, where he is now the assistant to Squeers, the headmaster, whatever you want to call him, of the school. And he's like seeing what's going on, but he feels so disgusted with himself, and he says that he wants to like pass away because he is like seeing what's going on and he's not like doing anything about it. But he also knows that like poor, like as he is himself, he needs to work and like send money back to his mother and sister. So it's just like it's such a good place to be, I think, in Nicholas's mind, and seeing how like this system did continue and did perpetuate, because there were a lot of people in many different positions that like didn't do anything about it, and why perhaps they didn't do something about it. So yeah, it's just been so great so far. But I'm 104 pages through. I'm going to stop babbling on in this first little chunk, but I just want to say welcome to this Dickens Diary episode. It's the first one, I guess, formally, but I'm just absolutely loving this so much so far, like so much. So that is Nicholas Nickleby. Okay, so I have some good news. Let's chat a whole bunch about Nicholas Nickleby. Welcome to day whatever this is of the Dickens Diaries, but I hit the 200 page mark last night and I have so much to say. I'm loving this. First things first, I'm in love with Nicholas. Like, I love him. I just think he's such a great character. I'm really enjoying him, and like it's such a nice surprise after the Pickwick Papers and Oliver Twist, where like I didn't get attached to anyone. I didn't think very much of anyone. I wasn't invested, but with Nicholas, with Nicholas Nickleby, I'm just like, yes, I love you as a character. I love following your perspective. I love your point of view. I just love who you are as a person. So me and my asparagus fern are going to talk to you about this book. So I think I was saying last time about how interesting a perspective like following Nicholas Nickleby is, because he's working at the school. He's since left Dotheboys Hall, but just like following him as a person, like in this atmosphere, in this time period, now that he's out of school, he's looking for different work and not just being a headmaster's assistant. But it's really interesting seeing like what his options are and how a lot of the positions that he finds himself applying for question his moral values and who he is as a person and his philosophy. Hence why he left the school and now he just applied to be a politician's secretary, and that was awful. And it's just really interesting seeing how someone like Nicholas, who's quite poor now and looking for any job he can get, what someone in his position would have to sacrifice just in order to survive, which is cool. And it kind of lines up with some other things in Oliver Twist and stuff like that. There's been so much drama, so much funny stuff. I've laughed a lot already in this book, which is a good sign, because I did not laugh at all in Oliver Twist. The Pickwick Papers, I like lost my marbles, but this one has been like a good amount of humor so far, I want to say. And just there's been a little bit more about the children at Dotheboys Hall, and it's just so sad. Like, I've been keeping track of all of those moments too, but it says little could be distinguished but the sharp outlines of pale faces, over which the somber light shed the same dull, heavy color, with here and there a gaunt arm thrust forth. Lying on their backs with upturned faces and clenched hands, just visible in the leaden light, bore more the aspect of dead bodies than of living creatures. But then this whole section, because we also get to follow Nicholas's sister, which I really enjoy, and we're getting more into like her perspective as well as his mother's perspective, which I'm enjoying, because she is also looking for work and their uncle is also giving her an opportunity to work and stuff like that. She just got offered a position at the Milliners, so I'm just really excited to like see her point of view more and see what she's doing. But yeah, just the description of London, the buildings, the houses. I'm like loving the description of the houses that he's talking about, because it's just really, really interesting. So yeah, it's just been really nice so far. I feel like it's moving at quite a steady pace from job to job, and we're getting like different perspectives. And his uncle's employee, Newman Noggs, is quite an interesting character to follow. And there's just like seriously not a character that I don't enjoy kind of getting the point of view from in here, which is nice, because in Oliver Twist and the Pickwick Papers, like I just didn't feel very much for anyone. But yeah, in case you have not heard of the Dickens vs. Tolstoy book club, we are reading all of Charles Dickens and Leo Tolstoy's works chronologically. So we are up to Dickens' third novel, which is Nicholas Nickleby, and which I totally did not know. He was literally writing this at the same time that he was writing Oliver Twist. And I think he was also working on something else at the time. So he was literally writing so many different things at once, which is so impressive. But this so far is definitely my favorite of the ones we read for the book club out of like these three. I'm loving it so much, and like I said, I'm 200 pages through. I know Carolyn is really enjoying it as well. I think this is going to be a really, really good one. And I'm very interested to see where it goes, because I know there's also a lot of theater somewhere in this book hopefully coming up, but as of right now, Nicholas does not have he just got a job. He just got a job as a tutor, so I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen there, because I think there's going to be some fallout, because I believe the family he's tutoring for, they believe he's like this aristocratic, gentlemanly figure just because he behaves like that. So it's kind of interesting as well, like the division between classes and like people's perspectives and views on Nicholas as well. But yeah, just really good things to say right now. I'm really liking this, so yeah. Okay, so for Nicholas Nickleby, it's a little bit later, it's like a few days later. I'm currently 384 pages through, which is chapter 30. It's kind of dropped off a little bit in terms of enjoyment for me. So basically right now Nicholas is at the theater company, and that's something I don't think I've talked about yet in this vlog, but he starts to work for a theater company run by a husband and wife and their daughter, who's just called the Phenomenon, because she looks really, well, no, they say that she's really young, but in actual fact she's probably like 20 or 30. But they tried to make her stay like an infant forever so that it would seem more miraculous, that the stunts she's doing are just like out of this world, which is an interesting thing in this book. But Nicholas has just been staying there. There's actually been a lot more drama on Kate's side because her uncle is using her essentially as bait for some of his business ventures. So she is just like thrown into this society of these awful men. There's about like 4 of them. And they're all just like preying on her and being completely awful. And we actually see Ralph like start to break down a little bit of his facade and like actually have a little bit of sympathy, which is really interesting. He like softens ever so slightly with Kate, only with Kate. And like I said, Nicholas, he actually is like acting in some of the plays, like in Romeo and Juliet even, and he's writing some plays or translating some plays to be performed. And it's like really fun to see Dickens finally get to write about what has inspired him so much, because he was super duper inspired and took so much inspiration and glamour and theatricality from the theater, which he loved so much. So that's just been really fun, honestly, to just like see him have that time in the actual theater in a Dickens book. There's also been a few more really wonderful quotes that are just, I just love it. A dense vapor still enveloped the city they had left, as if the very breath of its busy people hung over their schemes of gain and profit, and found greater attraction there than in the quiet region above. In the open country, it was clear and fair. The day wore on, and all these bright colors subsided, and assumed a quieter tint, like young hope softened down by time, or youthful features by degrees resolving into the calm and serenity of age. But they were scarcely less beautiful in their slow decline than they had been in their prime. For nature gives to every time and season some beauties of its own, and from morning to night, as from the cradle to the grave, is but a succession of changes so gentle and easy that we can scarcely mark their progress. So like I'm getting a little less motivation to keep reading it, but something's about to change. I think Nicholas is about to head back to London because he's heard some news about his sister being potentially in a spot of danger. So that is where he's going. But yeah, I'm still really liking it, and I am excited to see kind of where it goes and what happens. It feels like not that much has happened, even though I'm almost 400 pages in, but it's just been nice to like be along the ride with Nicholas, who is like a fantastic main character. Like, I just love him so much. Wow. Not worn red lipstick in a while. It's just feeling seasonal. Okay, so I am here with Nicholas Nickleby, the one and the only, to give you some final thoughts, because I did actually end up finishing this man, and as you can see, we had a rough time till the end of the book, basically. So this was a whopping 860 pages or something. But as you can see, pretty much in this vlog, I was just editing it. I've said really glowing things about this, and I think that does hold up for about this much of the book, I would say. So at the beginning, like, I was so invested. There were so many gorgeous, beautiful lines. Like, you were hearing them, I was reading them to you, and I hope they knocked your socks off, because it was amazing. Let me give you some more. Let me just give you some more to remind you. Okay, just the way he describes hope, for example. Such is hope. Heaven's own gift to struggling mortals, pervading, like some subtle essence from the skies, all things, both good and bad, as universal as death, and more infectious than disease. Okay, Tolstoy. No, Dickens. Okay, this one about London. It was by this time within an hour of noon, and although a dense vapor still enveloped the city they had left, as if the very breath of its busy people hung over their schemes of gain and profit, and found greater attraction there than in the quiet region above, in the open country. it was clear and fair. It's also been so humorous, and for example, this guy wakes up, he's completely hungover. Two men are completely hungover, and Mr. Mulberry says, "I haven't a grain of life in me this morning." "Life!" cried Lord Frederick. "I feel as if there would be nothing so snug and comfortable as to die at once." But yeah, so as you can see, like there's just been so much beauty and wonderfulness. And as for the plot, like I was telling you how it's about Nicholas being shuffled around. In the last clip, I was telling you about how Kate was finding a very hard life in the presence of her uncle because her uncle was using her. I found the relationship and the dynamic between Kate and her uncle Ralph to be really, really interesting because, like I was saying, Ralph is pretty much like a proto-Scrooge. He's quite Scrooge-like. He's very greedy. He just wants money. He's constantly scheming and all of this stuff. And just their relationship, like the way he would occasionally soften towards her, the way like only around her he felt some sort of sense of loss because he didn't have any children. And I think he just like in those moments with Kate, because Kate is like Nicholas, they're just so wonderful, so kind-hearted, and they will be honest and like tell you and stand up for what's right, but at the same time they're so kind even in the presence of such villainy. And I think like that really just hit Ralph in the face and made him like stop for a few minutes there and be like, what am I doing? These people are my family. These people are the only family I have and I'm ever gonna have. But in the end, of course, I think he does realize that, but for him, it might be a little bit too late. I don't think I even talked in this vlog about Smike, who is a boy, he's a huge character in this book. He goes to Dotheboys School, he's pretty much a servant, and Nicholas essentially saves him from the school and he takes him with him. And it's kind of like a Frodo and Sam situation almost. Smike's about 19, I think, but he's quite stunted. He's very sickly because of course he's lived most of his life in this school where basically it makes you sick. I really do have a lot of points for the debate, especially concerning Smike, because he's such an interesting character. And I think even though the plot did drop off for me and it became quite repetitive, I feel like this book could have ended is pretty much my critique. I kind of lost interest in a lot of things. We do have quite a full circle of a lot of the plot lines, like they don't just fall away and like it's never this unraveling thread that just never gets, cut off or wound back up. Like Dickens always comes back to the scenes that we've left for a little bit, so like that was nice. On the whole, I gave this 3.5 stars just because like this was marvelous and this was not so marvelous. As you can see, I only have 1 point here, and what even is it? Oh, this was really fun. Like my favorite thing in the last half of the book was definitely the Gothic coming back, because we have a character called Arthur, and him and his house. Just a fantastic portion of this book. Like it's such a gloomy, dark, kind of crypt house. An old house, dismal, dark, and dusty, which seemed to have withered like himself, and to have grown yellow and shriveled in hoarding him from the light of day, as he had in hoarding his money. Love it. The way that Dickens, this is so specific, but something I really love about Dickens, like really, 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 is the way that he describes furniture as well as rooms, like furniture, rooms, and houses. I think it is riveting. You just don't get that with Tolstoy, You never feel like a couch in Tolstoy is a character. At least I never feel like that. I feel like every single chair in someone's house is a person and is a character, and I can tell you things about them in Dickens, which is really interesting. I think it's a great piece of like writing and a great infusion of like the plot as well, because for example, in Arthur's house, like we learn that his chairs are like bony. They looked uneasy in their minds, cocked their arms suspiciously and timidly, and kept on their guard. Like that's fantastic. That already lets us know so much about the character and about the house, and as well as just so fantastical, so fun, so entertaining, and beautiful. Something that was like a little strange to me, I was talking about how at the beginning of this book, like we had tangents, like we would go from the story into different stories. For example, the story with the nun and the monks, and then we had another one about the Scrooge figure and the spirit of death, but we literally only had those two, and then that stopped happening. In the Pickwick Papers, that happened so often, and I felt like Dickens kind of continued on in that spirit in the first like 200 pages of this book, and then he just stopped and he was like, you know what, we're gonna stop entering into stories off of stories and we're just gonna focus on the main one. So it was just like a little strange to have like those like cool moments, and I really love those stories. Those were like some of my favorite moments. Where like someone is like, okay, I'm gonna tell you a story, and usually I hate that because I'm like, can we just please proceed like, as normal with the actual plot, because to me they kind of seem like a disturbance. I don't really care. I just want to keep going with what's actually happening. But in Dickens, like first of all, I think he really pours like his best writing into these stories within stories, and they are so fun, so wonderful, so spectacular. And I was actually really disappointed that we only got 2. And it was just like kind of a weird shift in construction of the book that I was like, okay, I guess we're not getting those anymore. I really like the way that this ended, honestly, with a lot of the villains, the way the plot wrapped up, although I think the plot took way too long to wrap up, honestly. But there were a lot of twists in here actually that I didn't see coming as well. So in the whole, I loved it. This is definitely, like I said, my favorite Dickens book that we've read so far. Not ever, my favorite book ever. It's probably Great Expectations, but yeah, so now we are on to Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy for November, which I'm not liking. I'm not liking it. But that is Nicholas Nickleby, and now I need to like sit down and actually write up my debate notes, because as of today is the 11th of November. The debate hasn't happened yet, so I still have some time to like fine tweak my notes and like get all my points ready, because I am defending Dickens this time around, which will be interesting again. So anyway, that is the first book for this episode of the Dickens Diaries. Definitely let me know if this is something you would like me to continue with, or if you just prefer like I work in our debate books, reading in my actual reading vlogs. But I do like having some dedicated vlog to like each work, I think, and picking that back up again, because it's been good to refresh myself as well as to kind of keep my thoughts here as well. I know a lot of you guys were reading Nicholas Nickleby, so let me know what you thought of it. If there's anything you think I should bring up during the debate, if there's anything you really hated about it, or if you loved it. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited to finish Resurrection and then start in on Dickens' Christmas works, because ooh, Christmas. Thank you guys so much for taking part in this little dream of ours once again, and I will see you very soon with either the debate, my next video, or who knows where. Who knows? I'll be everywhere and anywhere. So, okay. Ciao.